The air over the training range shimmered with heat, the kind that warped the horizon and turned every breath into a reminder of discipline. Red dust spiraled from the boots of 20 Marines lined in formation, rifles slung, sweat glistening on necks and brows beneath their tan covers. The desert outside 29 Palms was merciless, the California sun punishing, but it wasn't the heat that made the atmosphere so heavy. It was pride and quiet contempt. Corporal Lena Hart stood at the far end of the line, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. She had long ago learned that silence unnerved men more than words ever could. Her fingers rested lightly on the sling of her M40 rifle, her weapon as much a part of her as the heartbeat pulsing beneath her uniform. The course instructor, Gunnery Sergeant Mallory, paced before them, his voice hoarse from years of command. "This is the Marine Corps Scout Sniper qualification," he barked. "You've all been screened, all tested, all thought you had what it takes. Some of you are about to find out you don't." A ripple of laughter passed through the line. Dry, cocky, masculine. It came mostly from the group clustered around Staff Sergeant Pierce, a broad-shouldered Marine with a smirk that came too easily. Pierce tilted his head toward Lena, his voice a low mutter that still carried. "Hope the Corps brought enough pink targets for her," he said. A few others snorted. Someone coughed to hide it. Lena didn't blink. Her eyes stayed on the horizon. It wasn't the first time she'd heard it. Not today, not this week, not in her career. Every time she walked into a range or a briefing, she carried that invisible cross. The female Marine. No matter her record, no matter her tours, no matter how many confirmed hits she'd logged in Afghanistan, they saw the same thing. An exception, a curiosity, a fluke. She didn't correct them, because correction was noise, and noise was weakness. Gunnery Sergeant Mallory's shadow fell across her boots. "Corporal Hart," he said, voice clipped, "you've got something to prove today." She looked up at him. Her eyes were calm, pale blue like Arctic water. "No, Gunny," she said. "Just here to shoot." He studied her for a second, then nodded once and moved on. But Pierce's grin widened. The wind picked up as the range went live. Targets waited half a kilometer out. Steel silhouettes shimmering through the mirage, each Marine moved to their firing point. Sand crunched under Lena's knees as she dropped prone, adjusted her bipod, and breathed in the familiar scent of CLP and dust. The laughter had quieted now. The range was a sacred place, the only place arrogance could die and truth could live. Lena pressed her cheek against the stock, the world narrowing through the scope. The reticle found its mark. She remembered another heat, drier, crueler, the Afghan sun slashing across the Sanjin Valley. 2 years ago, her platoon had been pinned under fire for nearly an hour. Their radio man hit. She had crawled up a ridge alone, belly to the rock, rifle biting into her ribs, every breath tasting of sand and gunpowder. 3 insurgents with PKMs had the high ground, and she had counted their breaths, not their bodies. 1 squeeze, then another, then another, then another. 3 lifeless shadows fell in the dust, and the ridge fell silent. Her commanding officer had looked at her that night like he didn't know what kind of creature he was looking at. "Good shot," was all he'd said. But the rumor of that shot, 800 meters crosswind, uphill, had followed her all the way home, and that rumor had gotten her here. Fire. Mallory's order snapped the range alive. Lena's trigger finger tightened and released in rhythm with her pulse. Crack. Pause. Crack. The rifle kicked. The bolt cycled. The scent of burnt powder hung in the air like rain before a storm. One by one, the distant silhouettes rang. Perfect center hits. Pierce, 5 lanes down, cursed softly as his first 2 shots went wide. Lena didn't look up. She didn't need to. When the command "cease fire" echoed, the air settled heavy again. Marines lifted their heads, exhaled, checked their groupings through spotting scopes. The instructors marked scores on clipboards. Mallory walked the line. He stopped behind Lena, squinted through her scope, then looked toward her target. A faint nod. "Tight grouping," he muttered. Pierce called out, "She's just lucky the wind's calm today." Laughter again, thin, forced, defensive. Mallory ignored it. He moved on, but Lena felt the sting, not of the words, but of what they represented. The Corps had made her tough, but the constant undercurrent of disbelief, the assumption she was an exception to a rule written by men, cut deeper than shrapnel ever could. When the sun began to fall, turning the sky into a copper haze, the day's scores were posted on the board. Pierce scanned them, grinning until his fingers stopped. His expression faltered. Lena Hart, 99.8%. Pierce, 92%. The silence around the board was dense. Then someone muttered, "No way." Pierce crossed his arms. "She must have had help," Mallory's voice cut through the murmurs. "She didn't. I spot every shot myself." Lena stood a few feet back, her face unreadable, her hands resting on the sling of her rifle. Inside, she felt the faint pulse of satisfaction, not pride. Never pride, but quiet confirmation. Later that night, as the barracks dimmed and the world outside turned to desert whispers, she sat alone cleaning her rifle. The rhythmic click of metal on metal was a comfort. Every Marine had their ritual. Some wrote letters, some hit the gym, some drank. She cleaned. The act was meditation. A shadow fell across the open doorway. Pierce. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed. "You think you're better than the rest of us?" "No." "Then how the hell?" She didn't look up. "I shoot until I don't miss." His jaw clenched. He wanted a fight. She gave him nothing. "You think that's enough?" he said. "This isn't a competition. Out there you'll freeze, you'll hesitate." She laid the cleaning rod aside, eyes lifting to his. "No," she said softly. "You will." He blinked, thrown off by the steadiness of her voice. Then he shook his head, muttered something under his breath, and walked away. That was the first night the tone shifted. The next morning, the instructors added a new challenge: unknown distance engagements. Wind gusted across the valley, carrying the scent of sage and heat. Targets hidden in brush, ridge lines, and shadowed depressions. No markers, no mercy. Each Marine got one spotter. Lena was paired with a young corporal named Dunn, quiet, awkward, new to the course. "Range to target?" she asked, scanning through her scope. Dunn hesitated, then said, 600, maybe 650. She measured the mirage, the shimmer above the target's head. 740, she said, adjusting the elevation. The round cracked, the steel clanged. Dunn looked at her, eyes wide. "How did you—" She exhaled slowly. "You learned to listen to the wind." By midday, she had logged 9 perfect hits. The others averaged 5. Pierce's frustration became visible. Tension in his shoulders, his jaw, the quickness with which he slammed a bolt forward. The instructor's clipboard filled with notes. And then, as the final phase of the qualification began, a new figure arrived at the range. He wore no rank on his sleeve. Just desert camis faded from years of use. A quiet authority followed him like heat from the earth. Gunnery Sergeant Mallory straightened. "Colonel," he said, "didn't expect you out here today." The man nodded once, his gaze sweeping the line of shooters until it landed on Lena. His eyes were sharp, assessing, but not judgmental. "Heard there's a shooter here who's got the wind talking," he said. Pierce stiffened. "Sir, with respect, it's probably just range luck. We've got variables." The colonel didn't answer. He just motioned toward the range, "Run another round." Mallory hesitated, then barked, "Set up. Same targets, same rules." This time, colonel's observing, Lena dropped prone, the rifle sliding into her shoulder. Her heart rate slowed. Not from confidence, but focus. The world narrowed again. Crosshairs, breath, wind, distance. The first shot broke. The clean ring echoed back from nearly 800 meters. The second, then third. Perfect. The colonel watched her reload, his expression unreadable. "What's your background, Corporal?" 317, sir. 2 tours. Sanjin, Helmand. He nodded. "Confirmed?" 26, sir. The number hung in the air. Even Pierce stopped pretending to adjust his scope. The colonel studied her for another moment, then said, "You ever teach?" "No, sir, you will." That was all. He turned, hands behind his back, and walked toward the base road. Mallory stood silently, the realization settling that something significant had just happened, though none of them yet knew how deep it ran. Pierce watched the colonel leave, then looked back at Lena, his expression conflicted. Resentment twisting with something new. Respect, maybe, or fear. When the scores were finalized that week, Lena Hart stood first in every category. shooting, stalking, observation. But victory didn't feel like victory, because the core wasn't about winning. It was about surviving, enduring, proving the same thing over and over, until no one could doubt you without looking foolish. That night, as the desert sky turned cold, and the stars burned sharp as shattered glass, she sat outside the barracks again, her rifle across her knees. Somewhere inside the camp, laughter drifted from the rec room. But it was softer now, uncertain. She heard her name mentioned once, then silence. She looked toward the dark horizon, where the training range disappeared into night. Her breath rose in clouds. She thought of Sanjin, the ridge, the radio static whispering her call sign, Viper 1, the sound of her own pulse between distant shots. In that stillness, she realized something. They didn't have to believe her capable. They only had to watch. And the watching would change everything. The Afghan wind moved like breath across the barren range, dry and whispering, stirring dust into the air until it looked like ghosts were walking. The mountains stood jagged in the distance, black silhouettes against a pale, copper sky. The morning sun hadn't yet reached full blaze, but already the heat was pressing down sharp and metallic. The smell of oil, gunpowder, and sand mixed into something distinctly military, something that sank into skin and stayed. Sergeant Lena Hale lay prone on the gravel, her cheek pressed against the stock of her rifle. Her hands were steady, always steady, but her mind was not. She'd been up since 400 running drills, cleaning her rifle, and reviewing wind tables. Her every move was mechanical, calm, but beneath the surface there was a silent, coiled fury. The first day of the qualification had gone badly. Not because she never missed, but because of the eyes. The laughter, the unspoken, sharp-edged disbelief that cut deeper than a knife. "Lucky shot," Corporal Reese had said after her first bullseye. "Let's see if you can do it again when the wind changes. Sweetheart, sweetheart." That word hung in her head like a mosquito she couldn't swat away. Today was the long-range test. 1,000 yards, the real proving ground. Only one of the 8 shooters in the course would make it into the sniper platoon, and Lena had every intention of being that one. The instructor, Gunnery Sergeant Dalton, paced behind them, his boots crunching against gravel. His voice was gravel, too, the kind that had been soaked in whiskey and battle smoke. "Targets 1 through 8, you know the deal," he barked. 2 rounds each. You've got 10 minutes per shot. I want your scopes clean, your heads clearer, and your excuses non-existent. Hale, you're on lane 5. Lena's jaw tightened at the sound of her name. Dalton had been one of her father's peers back in the old Corps. He'd served with Captain Hale, legendary sniper, 2 tours in Iraq, killed in action in 2007. Most of the guys whispered about it behind her back. Some said she was riding her father's ghost. Others said she was trying to prove she could outshoot him. They were all wrong. She wasn't trying to outshoot anyone. She was trying to silence something. A shadow that had lived in her chest since she was 11 years old. And a folded flag was handed to her on the front lawn. She adjusted her bipod, checked the wind again. The mirage shimmered above the dirt like heat, ghosts. Her spotter today was Lance Corporal Marcus Vance. Broad shoulders, southern drawl, and an expression that made him look permanently amused. "You sure about that wind call?" he said. "Feels like she's kicking up from the left harder than you think." Lena didn't look at him. "I trust my numbers." He chuckled. "You trust too much in math. Out here it's the sand that decides." "Maybe," she said flatly. "But the sand doesn't pull the trigger." He smirked but said nothing more. She exhaled slowly, letting the world shrink until there was only the rifle, the scope, the wind, and her pulse. 1,000 yards away, a steel silhouette waited, man-sized, unmoving. She could see the shimmer of heat bending the outline, making it ripple like water. "Target 5, 1,000 yards, right shoulder wind, 2 mils hold," she whispered to herself. Her breathing slowed. In, out. In. The trigger broke like glass. A sharp crack echoed across the valley. The round sailed invisible, silent, until a half-second later the steel clanged. Center hit. Vance whistled. "Well, I'll be damned." Lena said nothing. She chambered another round. Dalton's voice boomed from behind. "Don't get comfortable, Hale. Wind's shifting northwest. She already knew. The Mirage lines had changed their angle seconds ago. She made her correction, adjusted one click on elevation, half on windage. She didn't think about anything. Not her father, not the sneers, not the weight of being the only woman on the line. She let instinct take the shot. Crack! Another clean hit. The echo hung for a moment before being devoured by the vastness of the desert. Dalton stopped pacing. Hail, 2 for 2. Reese muttered something under his breath. Vance grinned. Guess the math worked after all. By noon, the course had turned into a furnace. The air shimmered. Rifles baked, sweat pooled behind body armor. Dalton called for a water break. Lena stripped her gloves, flexing her fingers. The skin along her palm rubbed raw from the heat of the stock. She sat beneath the shade of a Humvee, sipping from her canteen, while the others joked and smoked a few yards away. Reese's voice carried over. You really think she's gonna make the platoon? Come on, man. It's just PR. They need one woman to make it look good. Yeah, another voice said. Watch. She'll get one bad call and crumble. Lena's jaw locked. She wanted to ignore it, but the words drilled deep. She didn't turn, didn't speak. Vance appeared, tossing her a protein bar. Ignore him, they just talk loud 'cause they shoot soft. She smirked faintly. You're one to talk, Southern boy. He laughed, fair. But I've seen you shoot, you ain't got nothing to prove, tell them that. He shrugged. Doesn't matter what they think. Just make sure when this is done, they can't forget it. She looked past him, toward the distant range. The wind was rising again, carrying sand like a whispering storm. Somewhere beyond the horizon, she imagined the ghost of her father, lying prone behind his own rifle, watching. Yeah, she said softly, they won't. That night the camp buzzed with quiet energy. The next day would be the final test. The field simulation. 2 days in the mountains, operating as a lone sniper, one shot that would decide everything. It was what separated marksmen from true snipers. Not just accuracy, but patience, stealth, endurance, and heart. Lena lay in her cot inside the dim barracks tent, staring up at the canvas ceiling. The fan above creaked with every rotation. She could hear the hum of night insects outside, the shuffle of boots, distant laughter. In her chest, the slow drumbeat of anxiety matched her pulse. She reached into her duffel bag and pulled out a photo, creased, old. Her father in full combat gear, desert camo, grinning beside a sand-colored Humvee. His arm rested around her mother's shoulder, his eyes bright, alive. She traced the edges of his face with her thumb. He died before he could see what she became, before he could see that she'd inherited his hands, his calm trigger finger, his love for precision, but also his curse, the need to prove something in silence. The next morning, the world was pale gold again. The unit assembled at dawn. Dalton briefed them from the back of a Humvee. This is the final test. You'll each operate alone. You'll move 5 clicks through rough terrain, identify your target, and take one shot. You'll have 48 hours. No comms, no help. Only you, your rifle, and the wind. He paused, scanning their faces. And remember, this isn't about comfort. It's about control. You lose your calm, you lose everything. He looked at Lena last. You ready, Hale? She nodded. Always. By midday, she was high in the ridge. The mountains stretched like scars across the land. She moved low, silent, blending with the stone and shadow. Her rifle, an M40S6, rode across her shoulder like an extension of her body. Every sound felt amplified. The crunch of gravel, the hiss of her breath. Her target was a steel silhouette disguised in the valley. A high-value decoy, meant to simulate a Taliban commander. The location was randomized for each shooter. She had coordinates, but no guarantee. She found high ground near an outcrop of rocks, crawled prone and glassed the valley through her scope. Nothing. Just the blur of desert, distant shrubs, and mirages twisting like smoke. Her mind slipped back to Reese's words. PR move, she'll crumble, not a chance. She spotted movement. 2 silhouettes near an old wrecked truck. Part of the test's decoy setup. 1 enemy, 1 civilian. The rules were clear. Wrong target, automatic fail. She waited, watched. The enemy raised a rifle. Her breath froze. She adjusted. Half-mil hold, 10-mile wind, mirage thick. Crack. The echo rolled through the valley. The steel target dropped. Perfect. But the victory was fleeting. Her radio crackled, an unexpected sound. Then a voice. "Hail, report." She froze. They weren't supposed to have comms. This wasn't part of the test. "Repeat, Hail, report." She keyed her mic. "Copy. This is Hail. Who's calling?" Static. Then Dalton's voice. "Abort mission. Do you read?" "Abort." Her gut turned cold. "Say again." But the radio died. Nothing but the wind. She scanned the valley again. And then she saw it. Not a silhouette, not a decoy. Two figures moving near the real ridge. One carrying an AK, the other wearing a vest that gleamed faintly under the sun. Not part of the test. Real hostiles. Somehow she'd stumbled near a live patrol. Her heart thudded. Her mind raced through training protocols. No engagement unless threatened, fall back, regroup. But they were heading toward the direction of the other candidates. Reese was somewhere downrange. She had seconds to decide. Do nothing, and risk letting them ambush her team. Or fire, and reveal her position. The choice was clear. She sighted in, adjusted elevation. The wind was howling now, pushing hard from the west. Her father's voice echoed in memory. "If you take the shot, take it like it's your last." She squeezed. The rifle barked, and the figure collapsed instantly. The second man dropped to his knees, panicked, looking around. She adjusted again. 2 clicks, lower chest. Crack, down. Silence. The wind carried the echo away. By the time the support team arrived, the test was over, but not how anyone expected. Dalton's expression was unreadable. 2 confirmed kills. You weren't supposed to engage. They were real hostiles, she said quietly. If I hadn't, the others would have walked right into them. He nodded slowly. You broke protocol. I followed instinct. He studied her, then glanced toward the bodies being zipped into black bags. Finally he said, "You're your father's daughter." "All right." Alina didn't answer. She just looked at the mountains, endless and silent, the wind tugging her hair across her face. The sun was setting, turning the sand red as blood. The day was done, but something inside her had shifted. The qualification didn't matter anymore. The title didn't matter. What mattered was that she'd stood where her father once had, and survived. But survival came at a price. The men would talk again, twist the story. Say she got lucky, say it wasn't skill but chance. Because tomorrow, when the range echoed again, they'd hear the truth ring out at 1,000 yards. The desert was colder than anyone expected. Night had a way of stripping away the illusions of heat, of power, of bravado. The sun vanished behind the black teeth of the mountains, and the stars came alive, sharp and unblinking, like 1,000 silent witnesses. The wind whispered low through the dry ravines, carrying the scent of dust, gun oil, and something older, like the memory of every fight that had ever taken place on this ancient soil. Sergeant Lena Hale sat alone beside a dying fire. The flicker of orange light cast long shadows over her rifle, laid neatly across her knees. The M40 gleamed faintly, its barrel scarred from use but clean, immaculate, a Marine's weapon to the end. Tomorrow, the review board would decide her fate. 2 kills, unauthorized engagement, breach of protocol, but also prevention of a potential ambush. Lives saved, mission compromised. The kind of paradox that lived only in the gray space of war. She hadn't eaten since noon. The chow hall noise, laughter, boots, gossip had been unbearable. She'd needed air, space, silence. Now she had it, and silence, as always, carried its own weight. From somewhere behind her came the crunch of boots. She didn't look up. "You always pick the coldest damn spots to think," said a familiar voice. Lance Corporal Marcus Vance stepped into the light, the orange glow tracing the edges of his flak vest. He held 2 steaming mugs. "Coffee," he said, offering one. Lena hesitated, then took it. "Thanks." They sat in silence for a moment. The stars shimmered above, endless. The fire cracked softly. "You heard anything?" she asked finally. "About the board?" "Yeah." He took a slow sip. "They're split. Dalton's on your side. Command? Not so much. They don't like freelancers." "I wasn't freelancing," she said. "I saw a threat. I neutralized it. I know that. But you know how they think. They don't want cowboys. Even the ones who saved the day." She smirked faintly. "So I'm a cowboy now?" He grinned. "Cowgirl, the deadliest one in the Corps." Her smile faded quickly. "They'll call it luck." "Yeah, probably. But we both know luck doesn't group shots like yours." They fell silent again. The fire dimmed to embers. Somewhere in the distance a coyote howled. "Can I ask you something?" Vance said. "Shoot, when you took that first shot, what went through your head?" Lena looked down at her hands, calloused, faintly scarred from rifle grips and training ropes. "Nothing," she said softly. "That's the truth. No thought. Just the wind, the scope, the map. And my father's voice, maybe. You ever meet him?" Vance asked gently. She nodded. "Yeah. Until I was 11. He was a sniper too. Figured, you shoot like someone trained by ghosts." She let out a small, dry laugh. "Sometimes it feels that way." The next morning, the camp was alive with the metallic hum of discipline. The flag rose against a copper sky. Lena stood at attention outside the command tent, her heart steady, but her mind running wild beneath the surface. She could face the board. She wasn't afraid of that, but she hated the theater of it. The men in chairs, the rank, the rehearsed indifference. She'd seen enough of it to know how little truth mattered compared to paperwork. When her name was called, she stepped inside. The room was dim, lit only by a single hanging bulb. 3 officers sat behind a folding table: Major Delaney, Dalton, and Captain Reeves from logistics. A laptop glowed in front of them, recording. Dalton gave her a subtle nod. The kind that said, "I've got your back, but don't expect mercy." "Sergeant Hale," Major Delaney began, his tone clipped. "You're aware of the reason you're here?" "Yes, sir." He scrolled through a tablet. 2 confirmed kills, 2,100 meters east of the designated test zone. No prior authorization to engage. You were operating under qualification protocol, not combat row. Is that correct? "Yes, sir. And yet you engaged 2 armed hostiles. They were advancing toward the course sector. I made the call to protect my team. You were not in communication with command at the time." "The radio malfunction, sir. Do you have proof of that malfunction?" "No, sir." Delaney leaned back. "So, you acted on assumption." "I acted on instinct," she said, her tone low but firm. "The kind you develop when instinct means the difference between coming home and not." The room went still. Even Dalton's usual smirk disappeared. Delaney's pen tapped the table. "You understand how that looks, Sergeant?" "I do, sir. You realize that if this had been a false alarm, you'd be facing court-martial?" "Yes, sir." He studied her face, then set the pen down. "And yet, the call was correct." Lena said nothing. Delaney sighed. "You saved 3 lives. Maybe more. That's not up for debate. But neither is your breach of protocol." Dalton finally spoke. "With respect, sir, she did what a Marine's supposed to do. She assessed, acted, and executed. She's not reckless. She's effective." "She's effective." Delaney didn't respond. He looked back at Lena. "We'll deliberate. You'll have your result by 1800, dismissed." Outside, the sun had climbed to full burn. Lena stepped into the light, squinting. Every breath felt heavy, metallic. She walked past the others. Reese, a few instructors, a handful of students waiting for their own debriefs. The silence that followed her was heavier than words. Reese muttered something as she passed. She ignored it. She found her way to the range, empty now, except for the glint of steel targets stretching across the desert floor. She dropped prone. No rifle this time, just her arms beneath her chin. She looked downrange and imagined it. The sight picture, the breathing rhythm, the perfect alignment of skill and will. It wasn't about the shot anymore. It was about what it meant. Hours passed before the sun began to dip again. When Dalton found her, she was still there. "They made their decision," he said. She sat up slowly. And he handed her an envelope. No expression. She tore it open, eyes scanning the single sheet inside. Then, nothing. No smile, no gasp. Just a deep, steady exhale. "Qualified," Dalton said quietly. "Full marks. Officially designated as Sniper USSC." Her eyes flicked up. "What's the catch?" He almost smiled. "One reprimand for breaking row. Command didn't want to set a precedent, but they couldn't ignore results." She nodded. "So, I'm both a hero and a headache?" "Pretty much," Dalton said. "Welcome to the Corps." That night, the camp held a small ceremony. Not official. Just a bottle passed around under the stars, the kind of Marine ritual that lived between regulations. Even Reese was there, grudgingly offering a nod. Vance handed her a cigar. "For the file photo," he said. She smirked. "Doesn't this break about 10 rules? Since when do you care about rules?" He had a point. She lit the cigar, watched the tip glow red against the night. The air was still, the firelight soft. Someone played an old country tune through a Bluetooth speaker. For a few minutes, the war, the rules, the politics faded away. It was just people, dust, and the quiet hum of survival. A week later, Lena was deployed forward. Real combat zone, not a qualification course. Her team, small unit, 5 Marines, stationed near the Helmand Valley. The terrain was brutal. Sharp ridges, riverbeds like veins across the earth, villages ghosted with tension. She moved like she always did, silent, precise. The team learned quickly to trust her eyes. Her calls saved them more than once. The jokes faded. The respect grew, unspoken but solid. One night, on overwatch above a small Afghan village, she lay in her hide with Vance again. Below, faint lights glimmered. Oil lamps, motorcycles, shadows moving like whispers. "You ever think about going home?" he asked. Lena smiled faintly. "Home's not a place anymore. It's just wherever you're not getting shot at. That's dark. It's honest." He adjusted his scope. "You ever wonder what your old man would think?" "All the time," she said. "But I don't think he'd say much. He'd just hand me a new rifle and tell me to clean it better." Vance chuckled. "Sounds about right." They went silent again, then, faintly, through the radio. "Possible movement, East Ridge, check grid 7. Lena adjusted her scope. There, a shimmer, a shape. She zoomed in, her breath caught. A man stood halfway between the rocks holding what looked like a radio. He wasn't armed, not visibly, but the silhouette felt wrong, purposeful, watching. "Got eyes," she said softly. "No weapon, but something's off." "Could be spotter," Vance said. "Could be civilian. Orders? None yet." She waited, watched. The figure crouched, spoke into his radio, then pointed toward their position. Her decision came like lightning. She exhaled, adjusted for wind, and fired. The sound cracked like judgment. The figure fell, dust billowing around him. Seconds later, the explosion. A buried wide, detonated prematurely. The air shook. The shockwave rolled up the ridge. Vance stared, wide-eyed. "You just saved our asses again?" She said nothing. Just chambered another round and kept scanning. That was the thing about war. It didn't thank you, it just gave you another target. By dawn, the village was quiet again. Smoke drifted over the valley. The sun rose blood red. Lena sat on the ridge, rifle beside her, her expression unreadable. Vance approached, setting a ration pack next to her. "Hell of a night," he said. "Yeah, you know they're starting to call you something." She looked at him. "What?" He grinned. "The quiet shot." She frowned. "That's supposed to be a compliment, big one. Means you get it done without the noise? No ego, just results." She smiled faintly, looking out toward the valley. The call sign felt strange, but right, not loud, not glorified, just steady, just hers. That evening, back at camp, she cleaned her rifle by lamplight. Every motion deliberate, ritualistic. The sand hissed outside, whispering against canvas. Somewhere, laughter echoed. The kind that came after surviving something too close for comfort. She paused halfway through, looking at her reflection in the rifle's scope. Her own eyes stared back, tired, sharp, haunted. For a long time she said nothing. Then quietly, almost to the ghosts that seemed to always linger, she whispered, "I made it, Dad." The wind answered, gentle and cold. Weeks later her unit rotated out. No parade, no headlines. Just dust, memory, and the unspoken bond between people who'd seen the line between life and death, and chosen to stay steady on the trigger anyway. Back in the States, the sniper qualification photo went up on the wall of Camp Pendleton. 12 faces, 8 men, 1 woman. Her name etched at the bottom. SGT Lena Hale, the quiet shot. Below it someone, maybe Dalton, maybe Vance, had scribbled in marker. Not luck. Not PR precision. In the end there was no applause, no movie ending. Just quiet. The same quiet she'd carried with her through every breath, every shot, every moment she'd stood in the shadow of doubt. Because real triumph doesn't shout, It just breathes, steady, silent, unshakable like the wind.